So, hey, Jeff, this is great connecting with you. I'm so glad Balaji from Pravasera from Page was able to connect me with you. I know you and we chatted a few times. I appreciate your thought leadership. I appreciate the value that you bring to the table from the AI front. And I know you talk to a lot of founders. So I am so glad to have you on my show. And the way I'm thinking to do this today, we will talk about AI at the enterprise level, how enterprises they are struggling, they're trying to adopt AI. And then in addition to that, startups, like small companies and startups and founders, how they are trying to leverage the help from AI and also are trying to help enterprises with their AI strategies and with their AI vision and their AI tools. But Jeff, before we start, I would love you to introduce yourself to my audience, and then we can take the conversation from there.
Hey, Neeraj, happy to. Thank you for the opportunity to be on your show and for you and I to talk live. I know you and I text often, so it's nice to actually interact live. So before I kind of go into myself, I think those topics that you mentioned are really important. And the way I look at it, many people say, hey, this is the most exciting time ever to be an IT leader in the world, whether you're in enterprise or whether you're a founder or whether you're an investor. I would tend to agree with that. But the reason is that it's new to everyone. So, frankly, unless you're Sam Altman or somebody like this, and even Sam would admit that every day is a new day, this is new. And so, what's really great is we have this unique opportunity in time and space for collaboration to drive some really important impact as well as speed for everyone involved. My name is Jeff Brittain. I am the managing director of the FedEx Institute of Technology, which is a research outreach program at the University of Memphis. Prior to that, I was the North American IT head for Bayer, the aspirin people. And I've lived around the world, lived in Switzerland, lived in New Jersey, worked all over the US. I am actively involved in 3 or 4 venture companies. I'm an advisor to them and help with their portfolio companies. And really, my mission in life is to help enterprises get more value from startups that is of mutual benefit. So that's
Yeah.
really what we try to do.
I'm I'm so glad you mentioned the last part. First, great meeting you, Jeff, and then building the bridge between startups and enterprise. Because what I have noticed, as a initial build, I was a builder, then builder to seller. The innovation which startups they carry out, sometimes big companies they miss out on those innovations because there's so much red tape involved. There's so many processes involved. So I think this is where I want to start this conversation with you on the enterprise AI. In last few days, Gartner has doubled down on their take on AI's governance side because what they're saying one challenge. They're saying that every leader is coming in. They're saying that those leaders they have invested so much time and money on AI, but they are not able to increase the adoption of AI because of lack of trust. And this is where now I'm so glad that Gartner is addressing that problem in their AI maturity model, because if audience can look up AI maturity model, this is like level 1, level 2, level 3, and so on. Most of the companies, enterprises, they're stuck on level 2, which is more like a data science project, experiment project, and they're trying to go to level 3, which is operationalizing AI. So Jeff, this is where I want to have this first phase of this first period of this episode to talk about, from your experience as you're talking to so many enterprises and startups and founders, where do you see the challenge of adopting this enterprise AI?
Yeah, so I think you've outlined it accurately. I'll give a little bit broader perspective. So if you think about the role of an enterprise, right? It's already an established company. There's already probably billions in revenue, depending upon the size of the enterprise. And you really want to be efficient in the way that you go to market. So it's all about kind of resource optimization and risk management. So when I talk to CIOs around the country and around the world, and I talk to board members, so often the CIOs are going to get pressure from their board. What's our AI strategy? Some of this is maybe a year old, because what are we doing? How are we going to get started? So you've seen in the last year and a half, this big push into what I call the pilotization of AI. right? So if you're a large enterprise, you've got hundreds of pilots going on. Depending upon your structure, they're either centralized or decentralized. Often you'll start with the standard 3 or 4 use cases around note taking, email, content creation. One of the things I focused on was bringing AI chatbots into the IT user experience, and all those are great. But then the secondary question that happens is, okay, how do I do this in a way that manages risk? And certainly data privacy and compliance are risks. But more broadly, it's just how are you smart on how you do this so that you're not giving away your trade secrets, you're not divulging customer information or provider information. And then there's an entire layer underneath that, which is really kind of truly industrialization, hardening of that infrastructure and that entire supply chain of IT so that it's protected from state actors or bad actors that might want to infiltrate your systems using AI. So right now it's a mix between how do I, this is my words, not anyone that you'd say publicly, how do we not do something stupid, right? That puts the company at risk, and how do we maximize what's going on? And
Yeah,
so there's this, and by the way, this is exactly where innovation occurs. And no matter what you're talking about, there's this period of time where the industry, whatever it is, struggles to figure out how to use it safely. And you could talk about whether that's radio, television, automotive, industrial revolution. I like to refer to Charlie Chaplin's favorite or famous movie where he's stuck in the machine, right? And, the industrialization has taken away humanity. Well, 100 years later, we're still talking about the same thing. Will AI take around humanity? I believe now is the perfect time to start looking at how do we smartly put in governance and constraints and guardrails that then free up people to really be as creative as they can be to go forward.
very nice. And this is the second topic which I really want to talk about because this is keep coming up in all the conversations that I'm having with the leaders like you, that we want to drive the innovation. But here's a CISO, they want to make sure that somebody's accountable for this innovation. So the bridge between innovation and accountability, and I think this is where all the CIOs, CTOs, CDOs, they are struggling because, sorry, CISO group is sitting on the sideline. They're saying, make sure there's no IP leakage, make sure there's no confidential information, make sure that you are allowing people to do the right things when it comes to AI chatbots, AI applications. And now this CISO group is sitting on the sideline. They are ready to bless AI, but they want CTOs, CIOs, CDOs to own it, be accountable for their teams. So, Jeff, I think there's still a little bit debate going on in the market that who should be owning the AI. It should be a CISO group, or it should be CIO or CTO or centralized IT group. What's your take
Yeah.
on it?
Well, so that's the $1 billion question that you get in any sort of engagement. But I would frame it maybe one level higher, is that AI has changed the role of IT, the elements of IT in enterprises more fundamentally than we've ever seen before. And so, if you're going to be using AI to do candidate selection and evaluation, then how much of your HR budget is actually a technology budget? And then, if you think back to the .com years, companies would like to say that they were software companies. All companies are software companies, right? And then all companies are data companies. I would argue today all companies are AI companies. So if all companies are AI companies, then the CEO must be accountable to making sure that AI is part of all functions. And then you could debate in any given environment whether you're going to give that accountability to your CDO or your CIO or in some cases even your CMO or your CISO. But what you don't want to do is say, hey, CISO, that's your responsibility, because that turns he or she into only a policeman. And the CISOs I know, that's not what they want to do. They're in this to actually drive speed. And so the conversations I'm hearing where people are leading is when you look at AI as a key element of your enterprise's true kind of core uh, supply chain go to market. So as it's tied to how do we, develop, market, and sell our service or our products or a combination, getting those teams accountable to make sure that AI gets right, that's when it comes together. And people like a CISO, a CIO, a data privacy officer, a legal counsel have key voices to make sure that's done right. But I believe if you give it to any one group, that you've missed the point.
Yeah, no, very good point. And I like what you just said about CISOs that because I have seen the mix of CISOs where CISOs, they are trying to block innovation because they are afraid. But now things have changed. As you said, at the macro level, CEO wants to implement AI because every company wants to be AI company. Now, as the pressure is coming from top to down, so now what CISOs, they have changed the angle. They're saying, sure, we will support the innovation, but we will not block you guys. Let's put a process in place. And this is where the whole AI governance framework, which Gartner is talking about, the TRISM and many other things are coming into the picture. So I am also seeing the same pattern where CISOs, they have changed their tone. They're saying we will support the innovation, but let's work together on the accountability side rather than us just sitting on the sideline.
Right. What I like about that is if it just goes into a policing mode, then two things happen. You set up corporate policies so that kind of on paper you're clean and you tell people what to do, but you don't have really any way to do it. And then the CISOs are left with no other reason than to lock down access. So when you think a bit more broadly, then the CISO's job is to enable that, in this case, AI innovation to happen with the ability to have visibility to what's going on. So within all the relative data privacy, constraints, and I used to work for a German-based company, so I can tell you those were very high on the awareness. You still want to log what are people saying, where is it going, what kind of DLP is still a real thing, data loss prevention from a CISO perspective. So I think when you say how do we use tools like DLP to then mechanically enforce responsible AI rules, now you give people the freedom in order to use it. And then, of course, you got to have the right tech stack and you know what you're going to feed into the model or not and how to keep that information private. But it's really by having the CISOs act as an expert in the technology around the governance and then letting the rest of the team start making decisions. That's when you can drive speed. Speaking of speed, I'm a big fan of, like, I like to save cost, and saving cost is great, but that only gets you so far. I mean, none of us, when we were 5 years old, said, I want to wake up one day and be in middle management and save cost. But we all wanted to run fast. And that, little boy or little girl in all of us still wants to go fast. So, where you can focus on speed, speed with quality, speed that satisfies your customer, that's where the magic is. So, let's use this AI governance to drive speed.
Very nice. Jeff, I do want to pick your brain on this. You lived in Switzerland, you worked for European based companies. It's very clear to me, based on what I'm seeing as part of the page, that EU Act got passed, and now European based companies, they are going really, really big and aggressive on the AI governance, AI security. They want to make sure that all the guardrails are in place and there's a way to do some risk assessment and many other things as part of AI governance. So the EU versus US, what do you think that, or what's your personal opinion that how long will it take for US to catch up with EU, where US is going to say, you know what, let's do this. Let's make AI as one top AI security and governance as a top priority.
Yeah, well, the mindsets are different. As you and I are recording this is actually the day after large tariffs that were announced from the US president. And so let's kind of, for now, kind of park the more near-term implications of what that may be and think in broader historical terms. What's good about both cultures? So from a European culture, it's very worker-centric, very kind of customer individual privacy centric, which in our ability to observe anyone everywhere with all their data is a good thing. So I think it's important to understand and take the philosophy of the European privacy intent and then say, how do you do that? Mechanically, you do see that in the current state, the current scenario, states are taking the lead. So think back to GDPR. So you're led with GDPR, then California with that, I'm going to get the acronym wrong. I think it's the CCPA,
Yeah.
came out with essentially GDPR at the state level. Then that was followed by Virginia, followed again by Colorado and a few other states. And so I can tell you that in a U.S. subsidiary of a European company, we were very aware of those items and wanted to be as compliant. So my answer is you'll probably never see true alignment. But if we can take the kind of American, just do it, get it now, innovate, run fast, break things kind of things in service of driving innovation and customer satisfaction, because no one in the world is as good as American companies and customer satisfaction. If you don't believe that, walk into a European restaurant without making a reservation and you'll find out. I think if we can take that American excitement, energy, and the European intent around protecting individual rights and data privacy, those things can come together.
Oh my God. Yeah. I think we all waiting for the day when that happens. Now let's just,
Don't wait for that to be codified in law. It'll never.
I know. So, Jeff, let's switch gears really quick on the AI adoption side again. One topic which is keep coming up that when I throw a name, a word, AI agent, 99% of the times the feedback is, oh, we don't have AI agents. We're still struggling with AI applications. It's mind-boggling to me. Look at hyperscalers, all these big companies like Meta and many others, right? They have so much human workforce. They have so much technology, so much funds, money, and so on. What is blocking? It's been like few years now, right? Like the whole OpenAI thing happened, ChatGPT, I believe in 2022. We are in, yeah, so we are here now, and openai.org was actually launched in 2019, and I'm following the openai.org since then, and now we are in 2025. I know everybody wants to talk about future, robots and many other things, but my challenge is that why it's taking us so long to even operationalizing or implementing AI agents, why we are still stuck on those typical use cases of AI chatbots.
Well, I might respond in a little bit confrontational and say it's already happening. So hyperscalers, by definition, are AI agents. So the ability to ramp up compute power
Yeah, yeah,
dynamically. But the only way you do that is you have to have some ML models that talk to other ML models and then execute things that are there. So in many ways, agentic AI or AI agents are fundamentally a version of automated workflow. And automated workflow has been around for 30 years. And if you think back to PLC controllers, even longer than that. Um, what's different is this concept of a human in the middle. And how do you make sure that you don't have a scenario where a model, and people like to blame the model about hallucinating, it's all about the data, right? So a scenario where you have missing data or inaccurate data that then the model doesn't recognize as inaccurate data that then goes off. And so when companies and technologies can actually put in the right visibility to have human control, you're going to see those AI agents really take off. I think, this is my opinion, it's not that far off. We're really talking less than 3 years for pretty significant adoption of agentic AI, and probably less than a year before we start seeing some use cases. I do like, I'm not a Sam Altman fanboy, but he's clearly in the center here, they're talking to each other about when will you have the first 1 billion revenue company that's a one person company, right?
that's
And
so
to do
great.
that, that has to be agentic AI. And that may or may not happen. It's a nice moonshot, but I think we are going to see agentic AI take off in a big way. But it can't happen without integrated AI governance,
That's true.
right?
Very, yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give you just a case in point. I was out this weekend visiting universities with my wife and my youngest daughter. We happened to be in Knoxville, Tennessee at a restaurant, and they were texting back and forth, and the desk said, "Oh, I forgot, how many people do you have?" And I jokingly said, "Well, it'll be no more than 300 people." And her reply was, "Oh, that's good because we only have capacity for 300,000." Well, That's okay if it's humans going back and forth. But if that was accidentally an agentic AI solution, all of a sudden now you've got people spending money on 300,000 versus three. And that's a silly example of where uh, the models and the processes have to be smart enough to understand when an anomaly, like you're not going to have a reservation for 3,000 people, or 300,000 people show up. That's when agentic AI will take off. And we'll see examples. There will be examples of people spending money that they didn't want to, but that's just learning.
I love the just story you just shared. Imagine, right, if the AI agent is taking the request, AI agent, the agentic workflow only knows the numbers. And it's going to say, okay, you're looking for 300,000 people reservation. Here's a reservation for 300,000. Because it doesn't know the tone of the human joke or the sentiment, what's up. And I think this is where a lot of development happening on the behavior of this AI prompts. And actually, I was talking to one of the founders yesterday, and she built a amazing in the stealth mode. She's building amazing product where her technology understands the tone within the AI agent itself, and gauges the behavior, how the tone is being exchanged between two processes, so that don't reserve the room for 300,000. It's a joke. We need a room for 300, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's what's missing today.
The people in your audience that are very pragmatic are going to say that would never happen. Your reservation would have just been denied. We don't have room for 300,000. But if you think broadly, there are scenarios whether you're ordering candy bars or socks or mittens on Amazon that actually could happen if you didn't control it right.
Yeah.
Sentiment analysis is really interesting and getting better, and I think helpful. The day will come that AI will make a joke that a human would laugh to, but the AI doesn't know why. It's just using math models. This is a common behavior pattern using comedic timing to make that work.
I love this whole topic of operationalizing agentic AI based on the behavior of the process. Jeff, I actually want to switch gears really quick because I am so impressed with Gartner. Gartner is keep coming up something new literally every week on the AI governance and security. It's April 3rd, 31st of March, 2025. A few days ago, they actually Gartner wrote an article on blended AI. And the moment I looked at that term, blended AI, I'm like, oh my God, what does it even mean? Then I paid very carefully the attention to what they're saying. What Gartner is saying that, what they're seeing as part of the AI sources, there are three ways to do AI, where you are building your own model, or where you're building your own AI agents, AI applications, you're buying something, and then there's a third source where everything is being blended. And now the challenge is customers, they're saying that, I have this third party vendors, who are selling their own copilot, their own tools, which has embedded AI. And then I have my own team where they're trying to bring their own AI. And now I need to figure out how to integrate this third party vendor AI within my own AI, which is a third source. And this is where Gartner is trying to bring the audience back into the topic of AI governance and AI security. As this story unwraps, these three different sources of startups are coming with their own AI in their own tools, enterprises building their own AI in their own applications. Now there's a blend of these two components, and then new sources emerging. I would love to listen to your take. How do you see this? What are the different challenges you think we may foresee in advance?
Yeah. So, despite everything we say about technology, the world really hasn't ever changed since the Romans, and maybe even the Greeks before them. So I would argue that this is exactly where we need to be, and it's a natural maturity level to think about integration. If we were 25 years ago, we'd be talking about ERP integration and how do you get different subsystems to work within an ecosystem, and what does something like SAP help or not. Now it's just a little bit different technology that moves faster. It's more of a black box, so it's a little bit less known, but it's still an integration question. And that's where I think there's an opportunity for large enterprises to take control over how do they integrate it. And when you do that, coming back to governance, governance can't be a second thought. If you're going to talk about an integration framework, in my simple mind, I actually make it part of the reference architecture. So if you think about that reference architecture, and there's some great models out there. I know investors like Insight Partners has a really good LLM ops integration model. And for those of you, just Google Insight Partners LLM ops, and you'll see some of those references that do include governance in that model. And so as companies start to build it, then you need to recognize you put that in. This is not a compliance question.
That's
Right.
true.
This is a how do you operate with speed and quality question. And that's where governance is in there. And there's a couple of variations that I think are interesting and important. And one of those would be in visual AI, right? So it's very interesting to talk about words and code, but then you can actually, there's plenty of companies that are building visual representations and using synthetic data to then rapidly increase the accuracy of, let's say, defect detection. Right. How do you get involved in that? The other end of the spectrum would be in the really important life sciences area of FDA reviewed kind of systems. There's some movement to go a little bit less from structured to more, let's say, risk managed environments in there, and a model that the FDA has called computer system assurance. But even within that, the ability to actually validate what's going on inside the model in a way that is somewhat predictable, and then to know if you get a result that's outside that bounds, that's when AI is going to be really important. You're going to see companies be able to put this into manufacturing lines and others to work with products that humans ingest or put on themselves. So it's really, really interesting on how this comes together. But to me, it's an integration
You
question.
know, I love you talked about the visual component because I was talking to one of my customers and they are into the drawing business. You know, they do a lot of visual stuff. And I was talking to them about the AI strategy and AI story. And they said, actually, we are on the level 4 or level 5 of AI. And I said, could you explain me the use case? They said, you know, what we do is our customers and users, they create a bunch of drawings, and in those drawings, we want to detect the bias. We want to detect the confidential information, any IP leakage. So we are using AI to detect all that, and we inform the customer almost in a near real time that this should not go into the LLMs. And I was like, wow, that's actually amazing. So going back to your point, you know, actually, my daughter, she loved Minecraft, and I think most of the kids, they love Minecraft. So when Microsoft bought Minecraft, I was like scratching my head. I said, why Microsoft is buying Minecraft? Then I realized that Microsoft wants to understand the mindset of kids who are less than 13 years old because they're spending so much time on Minecraft creating different crafts, you know, as part of the game. So now what they did is Microsoft, you know, this is my personal digging on the research. So they are analyzing those different drawings and understanding what kids are thinking and then how to monetize that data which kids are creating. And there's a significant AI efforts which Microsoft is putting on the Minecraft drawings. It's just crazy to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, we could talk for an hour on that alone, right? So think about if you can learn how a child thinks, then you can also learn to see how a human develops and how that thinking changes over time. And then how do you train a neural network to then also grow and expand the way that a human mind works? And then go on the other end of the spectrum and say, okay, now if you have somebody that's in some sort of a mental deterioration state, whether it's Alzheimer's or some other disease, how do you start understanding, predicting, and preventing on how that goes forward? So it's not just how do I sell more toys to kids, it's a fundamental understanding of human development.
Very good use case. Brilliant. Jeff, before we close this episode, I just want to talk to you really quick about the infrastructure side. AI is creating some significant pain points from the data center, from the electric, and also from the chip usage, right? And this is what I would love to hear your take. What do you think that where the future is going when it comes to GPUs, when it comes to chips, when it comes to quantum computing and AI?
Yeah, so a year and a half ago, I was strongly advocating that the company I worked for at the time really start modeling what the GPU usage was going to be. and I predicted the hockey stick. And we've seen some examples. I won't go into a lot of details where unmonitored systems can all of a sudden spend a lot of money. We saw that in virtual machines and a few other examples. And what you now see is there's a whole host of tool sets and companies around FinOps within the infrastructure space. And so, how do you then understand what's your spend? Have you left a compute unit open? When it's no longer needed. How do you manage that? There'll be a natural evolution through this, but I'm a big believer in effectively Moore's law, and that's going to apply in some form or fashion to GPUs. We've all seen NVIDIA's stock price on what's going on there. They're starting to get some competitors in the space. We could talk about DeepSeek and kind of what that means. That's a really creative way to do it. The next step after FinOps is going to be prompt optimization. And how do you look at things like this? There's some really interesting models out there using bitmaps to super simplify by 100x the commands that go into the tokenization. So if you can take your commands and then as is, but then run it through an intermediary and have it end up with 1/10 of the tokens that are necessary, then that helps to reduce it. But then fundamentally, we'll see some sort of improvement in technology. I am in Memphis, Tennessee as we speak. There's a big XAI center that XAI has opened on the Mississippi River to use the natural cooling of that river to drive what is today the largest data center in the world for AI. You'll continue to see those kinds of things, but ultimately, there's going to be some really interesting, you know, deep material science and computer science at the chip level that's going to make this more efficient.
Very good point. Yeah, and Jensen, he announced in GDC they launched a quantum lab in Boston, I believe, to track, how quantum is going to change things down the road. But as per, I think his prediction, we're not going to see anything innovative, anything happening, something for next 5 to 10 years in quantum computing, which is going to impact in some aspect the AI. But a lot of research is going on quantum side too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, now you're into the temperature realm, right? So you're going to be clean rooms with very extreme temperatures and manage that. The people, and I think was it Microsoft? Somebody came out with a chip that didn't need to be. Yeah, Microsoft came out with a chip recently. Yeah, so stay tuned. There's more great things happening in the world. So I tell anyone, we still live in the best time ever to be alive. There's still wonderful things that are going to go on. No matter what the technology is, there's 100 bad ways to use it and a million good ways to use it. So use proper AI governance to move towards the good uses and drive speed.
Just for fun, 4 years ago, I bought a domain called quantumcomputing.ai. So I own that domain. The domain redirects to my LinkedIn.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to buy it, now might be the time, right?
Exactly. All right. Jeff, thank you so much. I know you will be in San Francisco in a few months. Please do ping me and we should hang out.
Would love to,
Yes.
Neeraj. Happy to be on your show.
All right. Thank you,
See you.
Jeff.
Bye bye.
Bye.